Before the 2026 Champions League final, I very boldly stated that the match would be closer than people think. Others felt that PSG would walk away as 9-0 winners. I, like many others, was correct. But at what cost? UEFA moved the kickoff time to 6 p.m. starting this year. They say it was to make it easier for families and children to attend and enjoy the games. I think North London children were better off sleeping through this. They wouldn't be the only ones. A Champions League final, where a team takes the lead 5 minutes in and has 25% possession for the remaining 115. PSG are champions of Europe for the second time in a row, only the second team to retain the trophy in consecutive years in the Champions League era, and they deserve it. They've been immaculate for 2 years straight. By the way, do you want to go back-to-back with UCL trophies? Jose Mourinho, the blueprint is there. As for Arsenal and Arteta, you still get your Premier League trophy parade, but this is a tough defeat to swallow. You won't get much sympathy from neutrals though. Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Welcome back, I'm Tinashe. So, I did a watch-along last night for the game and it was really good. Thanks so much to everyone that showed up. It was fun. I thought we had a great stream. I just wish that we had more to talk about regarding the actual match. When the game looks like this, for about 40 of the first 45 minutes, what do you expect? Also, subscribe if you haven't, because I'm planning on doing a lot more watch-alongs for the World Cup, especially for some of the bigger games and definitely when the knockouts come around. To all the people that were in my comments in my semi-final review video, telling me that I was crazy for saying that Arsenal weren't going to try to go toe-to-toe against PSG on the ground, I'm expecting an apology. Because very clearly, your own coach agreed with me. I saw Declan Rice do a rugby drop kick at kickoff to immediately start the game off with an aerial duel. We have to make this illegal, man. Same with PSG's kicking for touch. All of this is terrorism. Although I must give credit where credit is due, Arsenal's first half, in my opinion, was like the epitome of a plan executed to a T. They nullified all of PSG's weapons. Vitinha was unable to work his magic as Arsenal players backed off him when he was in his own half and cut his passing lanes, didn't vacate spaces so other PSG players could come into it. Man City did something similar to Arsenal in the Carabao Cup, actually. Every time PSG went out wide, 2 Arsenal players blocked their path. Every ball PSG crossed into the box did not even make it past the first man, and even if it did, Arsenal had a lot of big bodies in there to make sure that it wasn't really that much of an issue. They were able to prevent anything dangerous from happening inside of the box. But they only did that because of what happened within the first 5 minutes. Not too long ago, everyone was always asking what Kai Havertz actually does. What's he good at? Well, scoring in Champions League finals, apparently. He's 2 for 2. And it was a good goal too, a proper sucker punch for a sleepy PSG. Marquinhos botches the clearance, Havertz carries it alone, and Safonov gets beaten at his near post. Perhaps you could say that Safonov should be doing a little bit better there at his near posts, but nonetheless, it's a great finish by Kai Havertz, make no mistake about that. You could say Arsenal got lucky over here with that deflection, but their pressing is what led to it and what led to their goal. And from there, Arteta requested that the gates be closed. PSG were looking extremely rattled in the first half. They had no idea how to get out. And, I was kind of getting flashbacks of the PSG versus Chelsea game in the Club World Cup final last summer. And I was wondering how Luis Enrique was gonna just unlock them and get there. But there's a reason why I'm sat here and Luis Enrique is sat there. PSG were bolder in the second half. They moved the ball faster. They targeted the right side more aggressively. At one point, Doué, Kvaratskhelia and Dembele were all forming triangles on that left-hand side, Arsenal's right-hand side, and kind of giving them the runaround. And it's so funny because at this moment, early in the second half, on stream, I was kind of praising Mosquera and Bukayo Saka so well for preventing PSG from really attacking down that side. I kid you not, as I said it, Mosquera gives away a penalty. Dembele scores, and from that point, Arsenal was second best by a very large margin after that. But they still held until penalties, and I tell you what, man, that's a victory. Because that's what they were trying to do the whole time. Too bad for them, Eze and Gabriel missed the mark. I was also really excited and intrigued by this penalty shootout because both teams had taken off their prime penalty takers. It was just really all the backups. That's why we have Gabriel taking the penalty that, ultimately led to what it did. But the day is for PSG. The word dynasty is thrown around quite a lot in any sport whenever a team has a remarkable year. Bonus points if the team is young, with room to grow, but are winners nonetheless. Anyone that kind of remotely follows the NBA, I only kind of follow the NBA, but I remember how people were talking about OKC last year, but they just lost to Spurs right now. So it's not always a hard, fast rule. But for PSG, in the 24-25 Champions League campaign, they were immaculate. Strangely enough, in both last year and this year's campaign, they did not finish in the top 8 in the league phase. However, as we can see, that mattered very little. In that campaign, they had to knock 3 English clubs out to lift their crown. In this campaign, they had to do the same. They then lost their goalkeeper, the best shot stopper on the planet, and also a player that a lot of people were saying is PSG's most important player in the Champions League knockout phase last year, especially how he kept them in the game against teams like Arsenal. They then returned this year, entered the UCL again, and won it anyway. And when I say young with room to grow, I really do mean it. Desiree Doué, Bradley Barcola, Kvicha Kvaratskhelia, João Neves, Warren Zaire-Emery, William Pacho, and Nuno Mendes are all 25 years of age or under. Ousmane Dembele is Unk at 29. Marquinhos is ancestor level at 32. Safe to say that this team is nowhere near the end of what they can accomplish. God forbid they go out and buy a player like Julian Alvarez. I mean, I know all the reports are saying that he favors a move to Barcelona, but would he really say no to a tax-free yacht funded through a Qatari bank account? If yes, he's a better man than me. Speaking of which, this video is sponsored. As is the nature of international tournaments, there are going to be a lot of people watching this World Cup from another time zone. Depending on where you are, kickoff could be at strange hours. Unfortunately, I can't help with that one. But the commentary might be in a language you half understand. The flavor and style of what you're being offered, it might not be up to scratch. That I can help with. It's where today's sponsor, Proton VPN, comes in. With streaming servers in 145 countries, with Proton VPN, you can connect back to your home broadcaster and watch the match the way you'd watch it on your sofa. Change can be good, but not all the time. With speeds up to 10 gigabytes per second, with no data throttling, and one subscription covers up to 10 devices. If all that sounds good to you, be sure to click the link in the description. Subscribers of the channel can get up to 70% off on an exclusive World Cup offer with Proton VPN. Thanks again to Proton VPN for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to it. Let's go on to Arsenal. So this entire year I've said that I was upset with Arsenal's tactics, but I respect them because of how they clearly are what got them over the line and won them their first Premier League title in 22 years. I expected this match would be no different. I think everyone did, realistically. I took one look at Arsenal's lineup and saw a backline of centre-backs and knew what the deal was. And honestly, regardless of how the game played out, I know a lot of people thought it was a snooze fest and all that, and I can see why, but I was having fun. But purely because of how ridiculous it all was. This man Arteta, he really is not beating the terrorism allegations. Not when your team is time wasting so much that you lose an attacking corner and the ref blows for half time. When your players are getting yellow cards at the start of the next half for time wasting at throw-ins. Thank the Pope that the referee clocked on to what they were doing and made sure that he wasn't taking any of their nonsense. Now, on stream, I was a little bit more gentle to Arsenal because I could recognize the levels of concentration that they require to play the way they did and defend the way they did against this PSG side. I truly believe that they had one of the best defensive performances that I've ever seen, purely from a preventative perspective. This is the best team in the world, PSG over here, but nothing that they did was working for them. And if you recall, I praised Arsenal for doing the exact same thing in the Premier League. Of course, they haven't done anything to this level of defending because no team in the Premier League is as good as PSG, but the philosophy of spoiling your opponent's party over going for the kill is one that's not really unfamiliar to them. Need I remind you all that before clinching the Premier League, Arsenal won 3 of their last 4 games by a 0-0 against bottom half teams. In each of those games, they could have scored more. I watched them, but they chose to prioritize securing the win and the 3 points over anything else. A good choice because we all saw how that worked out for them. And it worked here, make no mistake. Like I said, getting to penalties was a massive achievement based on how they played. There was no other outcome that would be as good as that. But as a football fan, I'm afraid I'm only really willing to accept these stalling tactics and, the low blocks and all of that if it results in trophies. If not, then you open yourself up to criticism and you can't defend it, really. Unfortunately, the margins between these two perspectives is that razor thin. I think a good parallel, for example, is when you see a player on a counter-attack and just bursting into the opposition half. He has tons of options on either side of him. He could go there, he could go here, but he decides to take it on himself and go for the shot. If he scores, my man, you're a genius. You've done so well. If he misses, brother, come on. And a big part of why I feel this way, it might sound harsh to the Arsenal fans out there, but it's because Arsenal have the personnel to play good football and win. I understand why they don't, but I think they can. They are not underdogs, okay? Everyone needs to forget this mentality. This squad has had over £1 billion invested in them over the last 5 years. This is the highest earning club in England right now, or they will be this season. They're not a minnow, it's crazy. But having said all of that, they will be back next year, they will be stronger, they will have learned from this, and if they make it to the final again, let's just see if they can make the third time the charm. Before we finish this video up, I found something quite interesting when looking into the minutes debate, because I know this is something that's going to be brought up for years and years on end, and before we get into this, I want you to know that I understand that this is not an exact science, but it's interesting nonetheless. Everyone says that PSG played significantly less minutes than Arsenal, and this led to them having fresh legs and all of that. Maybe there's a case to be made, maybe not. I'll let you guys decide. I used Transfermarkt to pull the total minutes played across all competitions by the starting 11s of both PSG and Arsenal in the final before the match. Arsenal's starting 11 had collectively played 2,400 more minutes than PSG's starting 11. That essentially means that on average, any given Arsenal player that started in this Champions League final essentially played roughly about 2.5 more games than any given PSG player that started in this Champions League final. It's not an exact science, I know. You also have to consider absences, suspensions, all that given stuff. Many PSG players were injured over the course of the season, which explains their low minutes. The same way Kai Havertz missed most of the year through injury and only had 976 minutes across the season before the final. Funnily enough, Warren Zaire-Emery has more minutes than anyone in a PSG shirt this year. If he had started instead of Fabian Ruiz, like I actually thought that he would, the minute stats for the starting 11s would be near identical for the two teams. Also, there's the fact that only 3 players from Arsenal's starting lineup that played against Crystal Palace on the final match day started in the PSG game. So Arsenal's starting 11 almost in entirety had almost 2 weeks of rest. Again, like I said, it's not an exact science. PSG had more control over their stars' workloads, especially domestically, and entered the final with, more carefully managed key players. Plus, I'd also imagine that, the quality of opposition plays a big role here in terms of wear and tear. I've chosen not to look into a lot of the finer details that might need to go into, this sort of comparison, and that's on purpose. You probably realize that we can go down a really deep rabbit hole in this case, but I just bring this up to show that even though the argument has some merit, it can pretty easily be countered. At the end of the day, Arsenal did not feel they could play PSG at their own game. They tried to tip it in their favor, it didn't work, and they lost. It is what it is. Anyway, Arsenal are Premier League champions, no one can take that away from them, they have ultimate bragging rights for that. PSG are Champions League winners 2026, well done to them. And there we have it. Let me know what you guys thought about the final. If you haven't, subscribe. There'll be a lot more watch-alongs coming on for the World Cup, more videos and more fun stuff. That's all for me today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you're having a great day. Cheers, and I'll catch you in the next one.